Hello and welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jen Kelly, your host today, and I'm joined by Ken, Ian, and Paul. In today's episode, we're talking about content writing. So we'll look at what content writing is, how it can benefit your small business, and stay tuned for ideas on how to come up with the content ideas, create evergreen content, and repurpose existing content. And we'll share tips to help improve your content writing and discuss outsourcing your content writing needs. And if you haven't guessed, the show is all about content. I don't know how many more times I could say content, but it is very important, and it is the way to differentiate yourself, to answer your customers' questions, and to get in the front of the line there.
I have a question.
Already, yes, go.
What's the topic?
I think we're talking about content.
All right.
Yeah, there we go. And we got a full peanut gallery here. So that's always good, keeping us honest, keeping things spicy, having some arguments, I hope, because we each bring a different point of view and different experience with different sets of clients to this topic. So content writing for small business, let's get going with it today. So Ian, I'm going to start off with you. And in general, let's tell our audience, what is content writing?
Sure. It's a great place to start. Before I even start there, I thought it would be helpful just to, excuse me, still fighting a cough. But I thought it would be helpful just to talk about what content is, just so we're all on a level playing field. So hopefully this isn't contentious to you guys. But I would say content is any form of media that a prospect, a customer, the public in general, or even Google and search engines can consume in order to inform, educate, or entertain. So when considering content, many people gravitate to the finished product of written content, right? Because we're going to be talking about content writing. But a lot of content writing actually goes into things that aren't just written as a finished product. So you have the obvious things that are written, like articles, websites, blog posts, white papers, press releases, category descriptions, social media copy, emails, ebooks. But you also have things like video scripts, audio, podcasts, sales scripts, even, and even phone scripts for your answering machine, right? So all of these things are marketing opportunities, and they're always better when you have a really solid content writer doing them. So at the heart of content writing is the process of planning, researching, writing, editing, and publishing content for digital or offline distribution and consumption. Simply put, content writing is storytelling for your brand. And when done right, it invites people into that story. So it becomes their story as well. Great brands invite us into their story, and we start to, it resonates with us, and we start to become part of that brand tribe, so to speak. And it conveys meaningful, helpful, and insightful messages. Really, most businesses want to inspire and move the audience to take action. So that's what I would say content writing is about, and what content you'd probably be producing with that. Any contentious issues there?
Not at all. Not at all.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Good answer.
It's only 4 minutes in. I'm sure it's coming. Great. Well, Ken, how can content writing help a small business?
Look, I think content writing is incredibly important. We work on a lot of different websites. We take over a lot of websites, or we work with clients to build brand new websites. And I am constantly amazed, never ceases to amaze me, how hard it is to get content from them to put on the website. Whether it's already on the website, it could be very poorly written. Look, there are a lot of cheap, easy ways to go to get content produced. Some content is practically useless on your website, but people sell it to you because they write it once and they want to make a profit, and they want to sell it to as many people, so they syndicate it. And a lot of consumers, of that type of information who put it on your website think that may be beneficial. It's not so beneficial. So content is critical. Content is what the search engines ultimately use to help make your website findable. If you have no content or little content, and there's this phrase called thin content, where if you have less than 500 words, Google doesn't have enough content to really fully determine what that piece of content really is all about from a search engine optimization and a topical perspective. So content is absolutely critical. I mean, it's been a passion of mine for years. I've been basically a content-driven SEO guy since 2008 at least, and it inspired me, shameless plug, in the end, to put together this book, Content for Marketing for Local Search, because content is what powers that local search, and you've got to have localized content as well. So having said all of that, content is important, but there's another layer here, and that is content demonstrates competence and expertise. Google looks at it in terms of what they call EAT: expertise, authority, and trust. If you're providing content that demonstrates to Google expertise, authority, and trust, EAT, then you have a chance of winning when it comes to to Google and the other search engines. If you're writing content that Google is deeming that, Google is becoming more and more like a human in the way it consumes content. And Jen, I know you've always talked about, you write for humans, and but you also have to think about writing for bots and and things like that. They're converging very quickly, and with artificial intelligence, it's happening at an accelerated rate, maybe faster than it ever has. And so I think you always write for the human, because as Ian mentioned, you need to get people to kind of buy in to the story. You need to get them to self-identify, to say, what, that is the problem I'm having. And yeah, I can see how this solution is going to transform me to a place that I want to get to. And you can only do that with content. And written content from an SEO perspective is the most important thing to be able to make that happen. There are a ton of other pieces of content that are really important. But at the end, the great news at the end of the day, you can take any of those other forms of content and turn them into written content too.
You said something about syndicating content. Could you talk a little bit about that? I wasn't too sure if you were pro or con it. Could you just explain it?
I'm very con, because I think a lot of people get sold that it's going to help them with SEO, and it absolutely doesn't. At best, what it's going to do is it's going to give maybe some helpful information to visitors who come to your website to maybe help them solve a problem. And there's certainly a role for that, but it is not a search engine optimization play. There are companies that write content. Historically, it's real estate, it's financial planning and advisors, it's accountants, maybe even attorneys. A lot of but it happens in the trades as well. Where people write these content and they push that content out, and you can buy that content and you can slap it on your website. Here's the bad news for you guys. Google finds the one place that content was originally legitimately, credibly traced to say this is the source of this content, and it ignores, from an SEO perspective, from a search engine optimization perspective, all of the other instances. So, from an SEO perspective, it doesn't help. From an experiential perspective of somebody who's actually on your website, it's not going to help you. This content is not going to help them find your website, but it might give them information to help decide that you might want to be a company that they may want to work with.
Okay.
But but I'm not a big fan of it, because it's sold dishonestly too much of the time.
I see. So it would be, for example, not to pick on real estate agents, but let's just say I'm a real estate agent. I'm going to buy a block of content, So now I have all my blogs for the year done, and it might be information like what to look for with a new home, how to choose a real estate agent, how to make sure that the driveway of your new home is satisfactory. Just very general, broad, but frequently asked questions at a general level. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several different ways you can find this. There are tools like Copyscape. Grammarly even gives you the ability, if you use Grammarly, to see if it's duplicate content in the eyes of Google.
Mm-hmm.
You can even just copy a block of text,
sure,
paste that into your search engine, and see if you get search results back. And if it's showing up on other sites, then it's not serving the purpose of SEO.
Yeah, but also too, it's what I was going to say is it kind of for the business owner, it kind of it's not showcasing like your value. It's not showcasing your expertise locally, your opinions, your best practices, your tips and tricks. It's just
there's no personalization there. There's no differentiation between you and any of the other people that are out there passing that content on to their audiences through their website.
Yeah.
And
sometimes those pieces are really badly written too, with error, typos and stuff. We've seen that before.
All the time. Yeah, absolutely. If you're working with, if you're buying content on the cheap, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to do what you're hoping it'll do for you.
Yeah. Good point. Paul, I want to go over to you now. How would you choose the platforms for content distribution? Like, how do you choose where to put all this great information out?
Just flip a coin.
Great. Paul, your long-winded answers are just something I look forward to each week.
That's actually a really good question. You have to understand or know who your ideal customer is, and that's a whole nother discussion. And we've talked in the past about knowing where your prospects or your customers are going to spend their time online, but you also have to consider what product or service you offer, I think, because your customers might spend a lot of time on Facebook, but if you're an accountant, they're probably not looking for your service on Facebook. So you have to consider both of those things. LinkedIn might be a better platform for you for something like that. So there's a couple different things to consider there. And you also have to look at, what tools you have. Like Ken just talked about original content versus syndicated content. And are you going to do this yourself, or are you going to pay someone else to do it? And if you're going to, I would suggest paying someone else to do it, because if you're running a business, you probably don't have the time to do the proper research and write content effectively for search engine optimization. And then there's a lot of scheduling tools you can use so that you're not starting from scratch. You should use a content calendar. It's a good idea to have a content calendar. But choosing the platform is, what platform is a customer going to be looking for your service? And if you have a service rather than a product, that doesn't mean you can't use a platform like YouTube. Look at, say, an HVAC company. They could do videos on how to program different types of thermostats, because you cannot make money on a service called programming someone's thermostat. You're going to lose money every time. Now, if it's part of a larger project, that's different. But if someone calls you up and says, hey, I need my thermostat programmed, if you have resources, you can send them to your website. Even if it's actually on YouTube, you can say, hey, go to our website. Here's the link. And we have videos on how to program not only specific types of thermostats, the more common ones, but we have generic video. Even installing a thermostat, same thing. It doesn't take that long to install a thermostat. And for an HVAC company, it can be intimidating because you have like 6 different wires in there, but it's really not that difficult to do. And for an HVAC company to go out and install a thermostat, again, they're not going to make money. So
it's also goodwill. You know,
It
because
is. Absolutely.
they say if you've got that type of content, there you're saving the customer money, you know, and you're keeping your business, your HVAC business, from, you know, losing money probably on that service call, or breaking even at best.
Right. And the next time they need something, there's a pretty good likelihood that they're going to remember you. They're going to come back to you for that. You know, their air conditioner goes out and they need a new one. They're probably going to remember you.
Ian, I want to move on to you. How do we come up with great content ideas?
That is a good question. I think Paul started.
Tough, eh?
I think Paul started off exactly in the right area when he was talking about or answering his question. That it all starts with the audience, right? You have to know your audience, what they're most interested, and through the whole process, because I've seen this happen, you cannot lose sight of your audience. This isn't about you. This isn't about your business. It is ultimately, but you can never lose sight. It's all about the audience. So you can get great content ideas from your audience, right? Start with them. Pay attention to them on social media. Ask them questions, like your actual customers. Ask them questions. Go to sites like Quora, or even local sites like Nextdoor, where people are posing questions. And things like, what are they interested in? So understanding, you know, are there some generalities about your audience where you can, like, does every single one of them like golf? Well, you might want to include some golf in analogies in what you're talking about. What are the biggest pain points? What areas are they constantly underserved in the marketplace? What questions are they asking? What questions should they be asking? What do they express confusion in? Where do they get hung up in your own processes when they're working with you? And what broader, I already talked about that, but broader interests. So I would always say start with your audience. Secondly, and often overlooked, I think great content can come from your team. Meaning, and I don't mean just a content development team if you have marketers in-house. I mean your broader team. So talk to your frontline people, your receptionists, your salespeople, your customer service reps, your tech support team. Learn what questions or topics keep coming up from customers. Oftentimes, this is really, really low-hanging fruit in a business for producing great content, because they know the customers. They're talking to them every day. So they're a great resource. SEO, well, it's right beside me, but you know from discussions on here as our listeners that we're all very into SEO because it helps attract people. So, but not everybody understands that the tools that we use to discover the best SEO practices for our clients, they are also powerful tools that allow you to understand what is it that people are searching for related to your business. So that's, we talked about going out to your own audience. We talked about going out to your own people. This is now going out to the world and saying, hey, on this topic, what are you guys looking for? And so it's just a fantastic way. We use it, again, to develop our strategies for SEO and for content creation, but any business could do that. They could even use Google as their tool if they don't have access to other really high powerful paid tools. Type in a search term, see what Google's saying are related questions, related searches. Chances are good that those are good topics to do. And don't underestimate the gold mine of this information, because it's data driven. Everything else we're talking is very, very anecdotal. This is one of the main data driven things that you as a business can do to really determine what are good topics. And the last thing I would add is your competition. Looking at our competition isn't always the gold standard, because they could be doing things really, really poorly. But where you can do some really great competitive intelligence is you can go to their YouTube channel, you can see what their most viewed videos are, and you can create something better, right? Or something as good, so that you start to draw away the eyes of people. And obviously, if it's if it's viewed a lot, or on social media, if they have lots of posts, and you can see the volume of comments, that's another great way to do it as well. So look at some competitive intelligence. And again, if you have access to some of the SEO tools like we do, you can actually look at volume of searches to a client's, or to estimated volume of visitors to a competitor's website and then figure out topics from there as well. There's lots of it's almost endless the amount of data and information you can get online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ian, do you guys do content to keyword maps? Where you look for, and again, this is from an SEO perspective, but it's a great way to get ideas on content. If you're trying to rank and build out your rankings to really dominate, your market, finding where you don't have content on your website, but where there is search traffic and search interest is a great strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just to bridge off that a little bit, when I think one of you might have mentioned this already, but when we develop content plans for clients, we're developing a high level topical list that then streams down into the actual, okay, under this topic, we're going to produce these actual content pieces to support that topic. Because when you create these kind of topic pillars or whatever we want to call them, hub pages kind of thing, it gives you a lot more power from, first of all, an attraction side on Google. But then you also create your kind of authority standpoint when people are searching for topics. So, and then of course, I think Paul mentioned the content calendar. That's super vital for actually getting the work done in a timely manner.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about, the concept of pillar pages or hub pages, skyscraper pages. I mean, they go by several different names, but you can't do that unless you have content on your website. And these are authority pages that Google sees on your website if you build these things correctly. Most of the content, at least 50%, 60% needs to be on your website and build internal linking. And that internal linking, where you're giving Google basically a roadmap to say, here's all the information about this topic on my website through the internal links that you're building to other pages is huge. And then when you link out to some authority websites and you get that mix, 50-50, 40-60, 60-40, whatever you can do, but you always want to evolve it to where it's ultimately going to be, I think, ideally 60-40 content on your website versus external site. That just doesn't happen. I mean, you have to have a content strategy and you need to build out a series of content around that theme to be able to get there. And that's like Ian said, I mean, it's authority, it's expertise, authority, and trust in the eyes of Google, but it also is in the readers as well.
Yeah. And that bridges really nicely in a thought that I had, Ken, that I should have shared at the beginning when Jen asked me my first question. But, if anybody is listening to this, watching this, and still saying, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do content, it's not that important to my business. Like, just think about the buyer's journey. So when somebody needs to know you, like you, trust you, try, buy, repeat, refer, how on earth are they going to do any of those activities in the buyer's journey without content? Like, content is the fuel that moves people through their buyer's journey, and it comes in many different forms. But it's so vital, right? You have to have content or people cannot move through the buyer's journey effectively.
Reviews are content and they're not written by the business. So, I mean, but reviews are written content that are incredibly strategically important for any business. And so you don't want to just have a content strategy for yourself, but you also need to have a content strategy for user-generated content, for reviews, for comments and engagement on social media, because that really rounds out the whole, the whole picture.
And what's interesting is what's going to drive the reviews. It's a really well-written text or email that's asking them to review you, right? It's that's where, content is just part of the air you breathe as a business.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Ian or Ken or Paul, I mean, you all run companies and you all have been asking your clients for content or we're going to help you write the content. Here's some questions. What do you say for some of the pushback that you might get around the more basic questions that, their customers have, but maybe they're tired of answering, or they just think, oh, it's obvious, because they're thinking about their business, their product, their service every day. So what kind of advice would you give about basic content, answering some of the top 10 most basic questions about your product or your service?
Your customers don't know your business or your industry. They may know it at a high level, but what makes you better than your competitor? What differentiates you?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that.
They also don't know your terminology. So one of the biggest websites, one of the biggest mistakes a lot of businesses make when it comes to content they put on the website is it's jargon. It means nothing to the user, unless they're a very sophisticated user, which may be okay. I mean, if that's your target audience, good for you. You're nailing it. But most of the time, it's not for that reason. It's because you need to put yourself into your customers, clients, patients' shoes. Think about, how are they viewing the world? How are they describing the world? What questions are they asking? What phrases are they using? And that's the content that really moves the needle.
Yeah, and it's super low-hanging fruit. Like, you couldn't ask for any easier content to produce, because people, it's frequently asked questions. Why would you not produce content? And by that, I mean make content that's easily findable online, because they're either going to ask a professional, they're going to ask their friends, colleagues, or families, or they're going to search for it themselves online. And then the other thing I would say is, depending on the structure of your organization, equip your team with those FAQ responses as well, because chances are a receptionist, an inside salesperson, whatever it is, your tech guys out in the field, tech guys and gals, those questions are going to be asked. So why not give them some answers that make sense, so they're not put on the spot and fumbling, and they're easy things for you guys to do, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The pushback we've gotten is, we already talked about that, or we said that in a previous blog post and whatnot. And my challenge back is often, I mean, yes, we did. We talked about that in blog 6, for example. However, when you go to a website, are you going through every single blog to find your answer? No, you're starting with the ones that seem to answer your question. You're not going to search the whole entire website, and read every single word. I hate to tell you. So you got to make it easy for people to find these kind of answers. And if you have to answer the same question frequently, I mean, that's part of the customer service. That's part of doing business, right? That's part of getting to the contract. So,
yeah.
And sometimes context is key, right? They might be, because your article or your video might be on kind of a specific topic, you might answer that question again, but it's going to be in a different frame, a different context that's very, very specific to what they're dealing with in that topic. So it's tough, right? It's tough, as a marketer to guide and instruct clients sometimes, but it's really important, because we are their partners in this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great. Ken, I want to move on to Evergreen Content. So can you talk about what Evergreen Content is and how it can benefit our clients' businesses?
Yeah, so Evergreen Content is really, it's that content that's pervasive. It doesn't change. It's not, it could be seasonal, but it could be evergreen across, every year for every season. So if it is seasonal, think about that. But typically evergreen content is going to be that stuff that, again, that's where frequently asked questions can be such a good thing, and should ask questions is another really important thing. There are a lot of questions that people, especially to differentiate yourself from competitors, you might want to have, well, here are the questions you really should be asking, in addition to all of these, and that's the type of information that you can use and repurpose over and over and over again throughout the year, through different channels, on different mediums. and it's just critically important. So, and it could be a blog post that you periodically drive links from social media posts back to that blog, because again, it's content that lives on. I mean, and it's still as relevant today as it was when you wrote it 6 months ago, a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that you always want to leave it alone. You probably always need to go back and update and tweak that older content a little bit. I mean, that's really a best practice. The world does change. So what you said 2 years ago, there may be a small percentage that needs to be go in and update, but the overall content is solid and still relevant today. So evergreen content is also fantastic to take and chunk out. I love one of our strategies is we go find and look for evergreen blog posts and evergreen articles, and then we create a series of social media posts from that evergreen content. Every blog post gives you, if you're writing 7 tips to do this, you've got 8 potential pieces of social media content, one for the whole shebang, and then one for each of the tips. And if it's evergreen, you can take that and you can put it into and you can repost that over and over and over again. So you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Social media is a river, so it's not like you post it once and you're done. If you want to get somebody off social media or get them to even get it in their news feed, you need to post content, the same piece of content, if it's a valuable piece of content to you, over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So evergreen content, I think, should be one of your strongest drivers in your content strategy. That's not to say it's the only thing you need to do, but it's kind of like that. It's kind of like the tank, that just drives everything forward. And then you've got like the aircraft and the missiles and all this kind of stuff. I hate to use a war analogy, but to be able to to really glitz up and differentiate yourself with the other pieces of content. But think about this evergreen as just this, ever running machine that just keeps going. It's like the ever Energizer Bunny, maybe, I guess. Maybe that's.
Well, I have another
going off because I'm not pro war. I'm going off on that direction. Although I do come from working in a DoD background, and I do think about the concepts that they talk about a lot of times. We've talked about before, force multipliers. I mean, to me, evergreen content is what gives you the ability to have the force multiplication.
And if I can just add to that analogy, but use a different one.
Good.
So I actually think about evergreen content, just keeping it in the term evergreen, right? Like a tree. I actually prefer to think of it as, because here's the thing. If you plant a tree, it's not a forest, right? It's just a tree. You can get shade from it. It's giving you in this context information, and it can live on. But when you start consistently planting evergreen content, you're essentially planting a forest of content that's going to serve your business for years and years and years to come. It's so very cool. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always amazed at, because we use some pretty sophisticated systems, and I think you do as well, for sure, Ken, because we've talked about apps and stuff like that we use. But there's tools we use in order to create that evergreen content, but then also to keep it in front of the client's audience over and over and over. Right. And when you're watching kind of the impact of that over time, it's so very impressive. And I'm always impressed once we've been working with a client for a year, 2 years, 3 years, how that evergreen content is really filling out their social channels, their, all of the other things we do for them. It's just very cool to watch.
Yeah. You can write the best blog post in the world. But if you just post it on your website and then wait for Google to pick it up, index it, and let people find it, you're probably going to be disappointed in that performance. If you fuel it with, because it's great evergreen content. So it's always going to be relevant. If you fuel it with some of the things that Ian was talking about with these tools that I know both of us use, I'm sure you use some too, Jen, where you're driving traffic back to that blog post, the cumulative impact that has over time is massive.
We need a term. We always have the one, if we build it, they will come, from Field of Dreams. We need like the Field of Bad Dreams, right? Where it's like, that doesn't work. We know as marketers in the field that you can't just build a website and it will just magically work. You need to do more.
Well, it's kind of like the bridge to nowhere.
Nice analogy.
I think it has to be scarier. Okay.
Bridge to hell. I don't know.
That's right. That's
Field of Nightmares.
Field of Nightmares. Well, I want to do just a little bit of an example here. So we're all talking about evergreen content. We all know what that is, but I want to give it a couple of examples of blog post titles, and just from the title, for our audience, so you really get the understanding of what evergreen would mean. So if you had a blog post title that said, getting started with online newsletters, would that be an example of some evergreen content that could be posted out next week, next month, in 6 months, and probably still be relevant? Yeah. Okay. What about a post about come see our booth at the July 31st fair? Would that be evergreen? No, because it's got a date to it, right? It's date specific. Right. Yeah, right. Ian, you're laughing at me here, but but the thing is, I think we're falling into the trap too, right? We're talking evergreen content, we're talking all these marketing terms, but the point is to make sure that the small business owners understand that it is a piece of content, it's video, it's information that is relevant today, next week, 6 months from now, will still be relevant. It's not time expiring. It's not based on, certain events happening, and it's relevant ongoing. So I just wanted to drive that point home, because that can make the difference. If a small business owner is like, okay, I can sweat it out and like develop some content because I know this thing's going to have life for 18 months, rather than, like the fair we're going to in 3 days, like, I'm going to have to do this all over again next month, right?
Yeah. That's a great point. So email marketing is great, because email marketing has been one of these tried and true tools that's worked for decades at this point. But if you wrote an article about, the 6 things to make your Instagram profile stand out, if you write that today, that's probably not evergreen. It might be evergreen for maybe 6 months, right? But chances are, because the nature of these social media platforms is changing at a faster pace, because they're trying to, to find ways to stay relevant or one up the other. Or there are new platforms that come along where they need to adapt different, like TikTok has come along and it's changed the whole concept of what some of these social media platforms needs to try to do to keep an audience. So it's always going to be relevant to the topic. Whether or not it could be evergreen. Some things can be more evergreen than others. You could probably still write, there are probably still very relevant things that I know there are relevant things that you could write about Instagram that are evergreen, but many of the things with a platform like Instagram or something that changes on a rapid basis are not going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I don't actually classify evergreen content as content you produce once and never touch again. Like, I think it's important, at least from my perspective, that the listeners understand that, when we talk about evergreen content, it doesn't mean you'll never update it. It just means that, 90% of your content won't change because it's consistent year after year after year. That's but right. You might want to update sections of it. Like your example about Instagram, maybe 90% of your Instagram article is going to be consistent, and it is a form of evergreen content. You just need to update it, every year with maybe a few more tips, or change out a few tips, or whatever it is.
Right.
But the basis, the foundation of the article is still there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's good SEO best practice, as well as good.
Apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, Watch decided to talk to me. So speaking of that, one of the things I want to make sure we talk about before we do this since I got distracted, is there are easy ways to create content. And I don't want people to get wrapped around the axle to think that, oh my God, I got to sit down in front of a keyboard and crank this stuff out. Because I have a little bit of a difference with Paul and what he said earlier, in that, certain people, they need to be working on running their business. But at the same time, there are only certain things that they know that, they're going to have to contribute, because people who don't live and breathe and work in that business don't necessarily know. So while I agree that they shouldn't spend the majority of their time doing it, I want to look for ways to simplify it. And one of the best ways to do that is audio or video recording.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get out of the way. Don't let the keyboard or writer's block get in your way. Just talk about the important things. And because we can take that, we can transcribe it, we can turn it into good, useful content. But there are certain things, that, if you're in a very technical industry or, very stringent regulatory requirements or legal requirements, we have to get that content from our customers when we're working with them, or the business has to provide that content. But that doesn't mean they have to write it all. They just have to fuel it.
Yeah, Ken, I love where you're going with that. Just to give an anecdote to our viewers, there was an orthodontist I was working with for quite a few years, and we would do just what we talked about. We would create a content calendar, topics, actual specific blog posts, and some of them were highly technical. And yes, our writers can research them, but we really wanted to make sure the tone of voice of our specific orthodontist was coming through, and that we also understood his point of view on certain topics. So what we found worked with him is, as soon as he was in the office, there was no time, right? He was just bombarded with, the tyranny of the urgent. So we came up with the idea that he would actually put his phone in front of him while he was driving. I would give him a list of 3 topics to do for the coming month. He would just riff off about a topic. It would take him 5 minutes. Usually the audios were about 5 minutes, some shorter, some longer. But that gave us the meat in the stew of creating content for him. And it first of all, highly simplified the process. It met his need of, I have to have my point of view in here that differentiates me from all the other orthodontists. And it equipped us to do a really great job. And it ultimately reduced revisions, which saved us time and money and saved him time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so important. If you're a home remodeling contractor, as you're driving from one job to the next, you want to be safe about this. But an audio recording, you turn it on before you back out of the driveway, and you just talk as you can while you're going between jobs. I mean, you're capturing project-specific information that is fantastic to put on your website. So yeah, I mean, however you can do it, block out a little bit of time. I mean, most people are going to be much more proficient if they for me, over the weekend, and I know we have a colleague, from the duct tape marketing network that we're all a part of, that shared this at one of our conferences one time, where he uses just a little bit of time on Sunday afternoon, and it can be any time, but out of your normal working hours, just to organize himself for the upcoming week, so that that way he knows he can relax, get things taken care of. But you can do that from a content perspective too. And so just find that time and block it out, and use it in a way that where you can convey only what you or the people who are working in your business can convey.
And just a point of clarity, these audio recordings, the public never heard them.
Right.
They were for us, right?
Right.
To equip.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are the type of person or running into this challenge, we have this challenge. It's either, sure, what do you want to know? Just ask me a question, right? So sometimes your subject matter experts need the prompting of a certain type of question or a certain topic in order to, release the gates of, their intelligence.
Right.
Other times we found that many people are not used to proclaiming their opinions or their expertise publicly. So, a common bit of resistance can be, well, like, I'm not sure what I'd say. I'm not sure what I'd talk about. But once having to answer some pointed questions, it is amazing what can come out. So if there's a couple of different areas, like these guys were given some suggestions on, it doesn't have to be you at your lonely computer trying to, type out 1,000-word blog post. There's many ways to get the expertise out there.
Yep.
Paul, second last question for you. What are some tips for effective content writing?
Well, a few, I suppose. Start, what do you want to accomplish with this piece of content, and where does it fit in the buyer journey? We've talked about that before. You have to have different content for different steps in the buyer journey. So you need to start there, and you need to know, again, it goes back to your ideal customer. Who are you writing this for? And how is this going to solve their problem or address their pain point? Because when you're writing content, you're writing it for the reader, not for you. And we've talked about this before. Your website, a lot of times we have businesses, they want their website to look this way or that way, and your website is not for you. It's for your customers and your prospective customers, and that goes for the content as well. And the other thing, not to be insulting, this isn't me saying that, but you should basically write at a third grade level. It has to be easy to read. People don't want to read War and Peace on your website, okay? It has to be simple, straightforward, easy to read content. And talked about this earlier, don't use industry jargon, because people don't know what that is and they're not going to go look it up. They'll go someplace else. And then it's usually a good idea to have someone else look at it. Write your first draft to get your thoughts down, get the ideas down, and then edit it and have someone else look at it, have someone else proof it, because they're probably going to see things that you don't. Maybe phrase something in a different way to make it easier to understand. Maybe you left something out that needs to be addressed. So those are, I guess, the four things that I would suggest.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
Grammar is your friend.
Yeah.
I don't write a lot of content, so.
Well, I was going to say about your third grade level kind of topic there. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, the tone of conveying your information can be very professional without it being, a word sandwich. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it is.
Yes,
it is possible to communicate.
Yeah, I'm not saying the tone should be insulting. I'm saying that the way you write should be at a third grade level, and that's in
short sentences. Someone's reading your blog. While I'm at Starbucks, right?
I think I actually saw that from Google, but it's I guess they have the data to back it up that and I think I don't know that saying a third grade level is the best way to phrase it. Probably like I said, it has to be easy to read. Don't use industry jargon. Don't use a 7-syllable word when you can use a 2-syllable word. Things like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna disagree with that a little bit. I mean, if you've got a sophisticated, specific audience.
Well, yeah, if you're writing for software engineers, that's different.
That's right. So let's use an example of a financial planner or financial advisor. Retirement plans versus 401k or 403bs. A lot of financial advisors, they just off the cuff talk about a 401k. a lot of people may not have any idea what a 401k is, because that's industry jargon. And unless they've had one before, they may not know what that is. But everybody knows, the concept of retirement planning. And so you might have a page where you write to retirement planning and that. And then, Paul, I absolutely agree with what you said. But then if you've got people who have the expertise and the knowledge and experience of 401k and they need a rollover, then you can maybe be a little bit more technical in the language that you're using. So again, I mean, we've talked about this before, and I'm just nitpicking here a little bit, Paul, but Ian likes it when we're contentious a little bit.
You could also have both types of content on your website.
But again, the key point is you need to write to your ideal customers. And if you've got customers who have that technical sophistication, write to them. If you've got customers who have a problem but don't know how to express that in the technical way, write to that as well.
And, going back to your example of a financial planner, that kind of goes to where they are in that journey. Very top of the funnel, they probably don't know anything. That's going to be your very basic, I'm just learning this stuff kind of content. And then as your audience moves through that funnel and consumes your content and gets more sophisticated, that's where you get more in depth about some of the nitty gritty type of stuff.
So here's a fun example where it gets really complicated, but you have to know your audience. Is marketing automation software for large businesses. This is software that costs $100,000 per year plus. You have multiple decision makers. You have the marketers who want something out of it. You have the IT staff that has to help support it, and you have the decision makers that are actually approving the fee in order to get this. And you actually need content for each of those people in order to get the idea passed through and everybody in agreement, and you're equipping them and helping that buyer's journey. But it's not about talking down to people. It's about not over talking over them, right? You never want to be talking at such a high level that the lowest common denominator of a client, as far as their word usage, their terminology, all of that stuff's going to confuse them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another good point on that, Ian, because in that situation, and in many situations, the person reading about your product or service may have to go back internally and sell it to whoever the decision maker is. And if they can't make a case for, your product or service over someone else's because it's too confusing, they don't really get it, then you've lost out there as well. So yeah, I think we have to think about that as well.
And they have different, they care about different things, right? The marketer cares about conversions. How is this going to help me do my job more effectively? The manager or the CEO that's signing off on it, or the CFO, they care about cost containment and how are we going to recoup this cost? And, you got to speak to them at all of their levels where it's most important. If I can add one more tip, just to Paul's, I would say, to business owners, because I've come across this a lot. I don't know about you guys, but I like to phrase it as something like, don't be the most expensive content writer in the world. A lot of business owners are like, I should write our content because I know our business best of all out of anyone. The truth is, you may be a great content writer. I bet it will take you, like, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say, I'll put money on this, guys. Come on, let's do a test. But I've seen it over and over and over again. And a business owner, like, I'm a great content writer. I rarely write our content to start. I give it to a writer. The reason is my time is more valuable than that, right? So I'm going to take way longer than a really good content writer to produce the initial draft. And it also gives me something to respond to. So a lot of business owners will say, I'm going to do it. It never happens, or it takes so long, it's so painful. And if they were to ever look at what their cost per hour was to create that content, they're going to be the most expensive content writer in the world. And it's not going to help.
That's such a good point. And then if you take it up one level, as in the responsibility for your company, what are you doing writing blog posts, Ian? We're supposed to be getting more business coming in the door, or we're,
Right.
You gotta fix this that's happening operationally. Like it actually borders on, being irresponsible for your business.
Yep.
So if we can go controversial.
Yeah.
With that, I'm going to wrap this up today, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please like and share our podcast. We have other thoughts coming in. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just want to talk about content repurposing. We've talked about it, but we haven't explicitly called it out. And that is, video or podcast content, for example, is great because you can take that, you can transcribe it, you can put it on your website, you can take the video content, put it on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever channels, you can chunk it out and turn it into social media. Content repurposing, if you do a webinar, you can break that out into 5 to 10 different videos. If it's an hour-long webinar, for example, each one of those videos, when you transcribe it, a webinar turns into 10 videos, 10 blog posts, and numerous social media posts. So find ways to be smart about content creation. It's a hassle. It's a challenge for way too many businesses. And I think it's important to find companies that can help you find strategic ways to create the content, even if it's outsourcing most, if not all, of the work to them. But you got to get it done, because without content, I can't tell you the number of websites I've looked at in the last month and a half where it's like, I don't know what they do, or I can't believe they're trying to get business when they only say 200 words, and I don't even know what their values are or what is their differentiation. I mean, it's amazing to me. So content.
And if I can just alter one word Ken said, he said content development writing is a hassle. I would actually say content writing, when done right, is super, super easy to the business if you hire the right people to do it, like the folks on this call.
Right.
But it's an investment. I would change the word hassle to investment. Invest in great content, use it wisely, put it out there. Boom, it's going to help your business.
Yeah, I think it's seen as a hassle, but it should be seen as an investment. You're right.
I agree with you.
I can't accept that.
I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
See you.